Hey, what's going on, everybody? Ryan Coogler here.
Ryan Coogler.
Ryan Coogler.
Ryan Coogler.
It's the moment. It's the moment. If there's a face in the league of Hollywood, it's him.
Man, thank y'all, bro.
Ryan Coogler has only made a handful of films, and on the surface, they don't really have much in common. You've got a grounded, hard-hitting drama, a boxing movie spinning off a classic franchise, two big-ass Marvel blockbusters, and a period-piece genre mashup. In terms of scope, scale, and tone, they're worlds apart. But look closer, and you'll see they all revolve around the same idea: how the past impacts the present, whether it's a criminal record, a family name, or a throne. Coogler's protagonists are always battling with their reputation, their past mistakes, or the expectations of those who came before them. The core theme of his movies is legacy, not just as something you leave behind, but as a weight you constantly carry. That theme is masterfully built upon with each new movie. And while you can trace it back to his earliest short films, the first time it really comes into focus is in his debut feature. So let's go back to that single fateful day in Oakland.
Oscar Grant's name may never have been known if he had not been killed just hours into the new year of 2009.
On New Year's Day 2009, a 22-year-old black man, Oscar Grant, was shot and killed by a police officer on a train platform in Oakland. It was one of the first major cases of police brutality captured on camera in the modern social media era, sparking extensive coverage, protests, and public discourse. The whole thing was pretty much the blueprint for the BLM movement.
So is your first instinct to make art of a tragedy or a circumstance, or is that your?
It is. Like I think a lot of artists are like that.
When Ryan Coogler set out to make Fruitvale Station, he wasn't interested in just recreating a tragedy. He wanted to reconstruct the final 24 hours before the world knew Oscar's name. Coogler's goal wasn't to turn Oscar into an inspirational figure. Instead, the movie is pretty blunt about the fact that the guy is deeply flawed. He's fresh out of prison, he just lost his job, and he's been cheating on his girlfriend. He's even considering going back to dealing weed just to keep his head above water. The film doesn't make excuses for him. It shows us a guy whose life is a mess, but also a guy who is actively trying to clean it up. And that's when we get to the first layer of legacy, his personal legacy. It's the version of himself he's desperately trying to build for his family's sake, especially his daughter. Throughout this one day, we see Oscar making these small efforts to be better. He comes clean about losing his job, he dumps his stash in the ocean, and he tries to be the father his daughter deserves. These aren't massive cinematic redemption moments, but they are Oscar's first steps toward becoming a better person.
I love you.
I love you too, Daddy.
However, let's not forget that Fruitvale Station isn't a redemption story with a neat ending. Just as it begins to look like Oscar is starting to gain some momentum, his past mistakes catch up to him. While out celebrating New Year's with his friends, a chance encounter with someone from prison leads to a scuffle. The police get involved, and we finally get to that fated platform. There, all control Oscar had over his personal legacy gets forcefully taken away from him in a way that's pretty hard-hitting. This is where the second layer of legacy comes in. There's the personal legacy Oscar was trying to build as a father and a son, and then there's the public legacy that ultimately defined him in the aftermath of his death. He became a symbol, a face of racial injustice, demonized by some, idealized by others, all of which he had no control over. Oscar was in the middle of redefining who he was, but the media and the public stepped in and did it for him.
His humanity gets split in two different directions, and the fact that he was a human being, kind of whose life was lost, kind of get glossed over.
And this idea that you don't always get to define your own story is exactly what Coogler dives deeper into in his next film. Because in this unexpected spin-off, this theme is there from the very beginning.
I can tell you about how it came together. It's really based on my relationship with my father. You know, my father was a massive Rocky fan.
For his next film, Coogler took on one of the most iconic franchises in film history. Creed is about the immense pressure of living up to a legend's name. Adonis Creed is the son of a boxing champion, Rocky's rival turned friend, Apollo Creed. And for him, that last name is one hell of a burden.
Fighters like Creed trying to get hard left hook by Conlon.
Before he even laces up his gloves, people have already decided who he is, how he should fight, and whether or not he'll ever live up to his old man. Because of this, for most of the movie, Adonis is desperately trying to outrun his father's legacy, fighting under his mother's name, Johnson, since he wants to prove himself on his own terms. On his way to becoming a better fighter, Adonis seeks out none other than Rocky himself to train him. Rocky's own past is closely tied to Apollo Creed's legacy. Having stood in his corner during the fight that ended in his death, Rocky blames himself for not stopping it. Because of that trauma, he's initially reluctant to see Adonis walk the same path, but ultimately agrees to coach him.
You see this guy here staring back at you? That's your toughest opponent. Every time you get into the ring, that's who you're going against. I believe that in boxing, and I do believe that in life.
To prepare Adonis for his first proper fight, Rocky puts him through a brutal training regimen. He improves massively, earning his first real shot in the ring. After an intense back and forth, he manages to land a second-round knockout. The win gets him a lot of attention in the media, and his past finally comes to light, revealing who he really is alongside his legacy. As a result, an even greater opportunity comes up, the ultimate title fight. But here's the catch. The promoters will only give him the opportunity if he changes his name to Creed. He reluctantly accepts, setting the stage for a final set piece. He won't only have to face a much more experienced opponent, but also his inner demons. Once he steps into the ring, it quickly becomes clear that he is way out of his depth. His opponent dominates the first few rounds, and Adonis takes a brutal beating. He gets absolutely hammered and bloodied up, but even though for most of the night he remains outmatched, he never stops fighting back. Toward the end of the fight, he starts landing heavy shots of his own, turning a one-sided beating into a proper match. The crowd finally gets behind him, and by the 11th round, it looks like he might actually have a shot at winning until... But then, suddenly... Fueled by a vision of the father he never knew, he drags himself off the canvas and beats the count. Even with his vision failing and his body breaking down, he pushes the fight into the 12th and final round. For Adonis, this isn't about a belt anymore. It's the ultimate way to prove that he wasn't a mistake. Against all odds, he not only lasts until the very end, but lands an absolutely brutal haymaker. In the end, even though Adonis loses by decision, he finally escapes the shadow of his father. The name Creed stops feeling like a burden and starts feeling like something he's earned by living up to his father's legacy on his own terms. Legacy, however, gets a lot more complicated when what you inherit isn't just your father's name, but something greater.
I was really kind of circling these ideas of African identity, and I thought it would be an interesting opportunity. It felt like something kind of lit on fire inside myself, so I knew it was the right project for me to do at the time.
Given his track record up to that point, it was far from obvious that Coogler's next two films would be part of the MCU. The Black Panther movies are notably bigger and flashier than Coogler's previous work, but the theme of legacy is not only still there, it's expanded upon. Now, the protagonist's choices affect not just himself, but an entire nation.
This never gets old.
In Wakanda, the king isn't just a political leader, he's a protector. The mantle of the Black Panther is passed down through generations and closely tied to the heart-shaped herb that grants superhuman powers. When T'Challa's father dies, he leaves him the mantle, the throne, and a legacy built on centuries of secrecy within an overly rigid system. He's taking charge of a nation sitting on the most valuable resource on Earth, vibranium, and choosing to safeguard it from the outside world even knowing could alleviate many of its issues. At first, T'Challa feels justified in this, simply following his father's footsteps. Enter Killmonger. He is the direct consequence of the aforementioned secrecy, the son of a Wakandan prince who was killed by T'Challa's father after he tried to smuggle vibranium to help the oppressed. Left behind in America as a child, Killmonger sees Wakanda's history not as a source of pride, but as something that killed his father and abandoned him when he was most vulnerable. Near the beginning of T'Challa's rule, Killmonger infiltrates the country, reveals his identity, and invokes his blood right to challenge him for the throne.
The whole country ain't gotta be there, I just need him.
I accept your challenge.
With both the title of king and the mantle of the Black Panther at stake, the two cousins prepare to face each other in a battle that will determine the fate of the entire kingdom. After a brutal, one-sided duel, Killmonger wins in ritual combat and seemingly leaves T'Challa for dead. Killmonger gains complete power and immediately reshapes Wakanda's legacy, both past and future. He plans to use vibranium to wage war against global oppression and orders the heart-shaped herbs to be burned, attempting to eradicate the very concept of the Black Panther, ensuring no one can ever replace him or challenge his rule. However, by the skin of his teeth, T'Challa survives. With the last remaining herb, he is resurrected and confronts his father in the ancestral plane, and finally realizes the cost of a legacy built on secrecy.
You are wrong! All of you are wrong!
He then decides to reshape that legacy. He returns, faces Killmonger again, and after an intense fight in the depths of Wakanda, defeats him. In the aftermath of everything that had happened, T'Challa gradually comes to peace with his father's past mistakes, even sympathizing with Killmonger's pain, and decides to strike a middle ground. He respects his country's heritage, but breaks its most sacred rule. By revealing Wakanda to the world, he ends centuries of self-imposed isolation and transforms the nation's legacy forever. But this decision creates a ripple effect and leads to unforeseen consequences. In the sequel, it's not T'Challa who faces the fallout of that choice. It is someone very close to him who didn't expect to inherit the mantle, especially not so soon.
I feel like a deep sense of gratitude and good fortune to return to the set and return to the family that made the first film.
Wakanda Forever was originally going to be something completely different, but the unexpected passing of Chadwick Boseman forced Coogler to rewrite the entire script, directly incorporating his tragic death into the film and giving center stage to his sister, Shuri.
It was really a byproduct of losing Chad and by proxy for us, you know, in our film, family losing T'Challa.
The sequel became a story about a power vacuum. With T'Challa gone, the new Wakanda he started building suddenly becomes vulnerable. Foreign nations immediately try to get their hands on vibranium. The CIA's underwater drilling expeditions uncover an extremely advanced civilization similar to Wakanda, the Talokan, ruled by Namor. In many ways, Namor is a dark reflection of Wakanda's isolationist legacy, T'Challa reshaped. But unlike him, Namor is not interested in diplomacy at all. He sees the surface world as an existential threat to his people, whose ancestors sought sanctuary in the deep ocean to escape the disease and violence of Spanish colonizers. He demands that Wakanda join him in a war against it. This puts Queen Ramonda, who has taken T'Challa's place, in a difficult position. She is forced to lead a grieving nation while staving off a global resource war, all while watching her daughter Shuri spiral into despair. Shuri is a scientist first and foremost, and has lost faith in the old ways. All the ancient rituals and deities in the world couldn't save her brother. Her mother expects Shuri to become the Black Panther, even without the herb's powers. But she isn't interested in being a hero. She is consumed by grief and motivated purely by personal vengeance, seeing the mantle as a burden. Because of all this, Shuri is initially tempted to side with Namor. He may be a potential threat, but he mirrors her own anger, and so for a moment, his us versus them mentality is tempting. It feels like the only way to keep Wakanda safe. But keeping T'Challa's legacy firmly in mind, she ultimately refuses, in an effort to avoid unnecessary bloodshed. However, Namor, carrying his entire nation's past trauma and wanting to protect his people, decides to attack Wakanda, essentially turning his offer into an ultimatum. The attack leads to the death of Shuri's mother, forcing her to make a choice. But that choice is a dark departure from her brother's path. She manages to recreate the heart-shaped herb and takes on the mantle of the Black Panther. However, she doesn't do it out of respect for Wakanda's tradition. She does it for revenge. She confronts Namor, and after a short but intense one-on-one battle, defeats him.
Wakanda forever!
But before landing the killing blow, she hesitates. She realizes that her brother's legacy wasn't built on war, and that Namor's death would lead to a cycle of violence, potentially wiping out both their nations and tainting their legacies in bloodshed.
Vengeance has consumed us. We cannot let it consume our people.
She decides to spare him, reaching a truce with the Talokan. In the aftermath, Shuri replants the herbs that Killmonger burnt down, ensuring the legacy of the Black Panther is restored for future generations. She finally finds some much-needed closure after the deaths of her mother and brother, and meets T'Challa's son, the future prince who will one day lead Wakanda and shape its legacy. In Coogler's latest work, this theme is pushed to its breaking point. In a world where racial prejudice has been present through generations, legacy has to endure even when everything else is lost.
My uncle's health took a turn for the worse when he got diagnosed with terminal cancer. It broke me down, and I would find myself playing old blues records, and I was listening to him in a different ear. Now that he was gone, like I'm studying the music and getting into it heavy, and that was really where the idea came from for the movie. It was all of those things.
Sinners is a mashup of countless genres. A horror musical hybrid doesn't even begin to describe it. The story follows twin brothers, Smoke and Stack, who return to their Mississippi hometown to reunite with their friends and family after years of working for the Chicago mob. Making good use of their dirty money, they plan to contribute to the local black community. However, they soon find themselves caught between two very different oppressive forces that tie into the theme of legacy in different ways. First, there's the racial segregation and oppression symbolized by the Jim Crow South and the Klan. Jim Crow was a system of racial control that was in place from roughly 1875 to 1965 in the southern US. It labeled African Americans as second-class citizens, deeply influencing their history. That system indirectly produced the Ku Klux Klan, an organization that wanted to literally wipe their legacy off the face of the earth. Smoke and Stack decide to create a sanctuary for the local black community by buying an abandoned sawmill, turning it into a juke joint, and hosting a huge opening night. However, the guy they buy it from is in reality a local Klan chief who plans to massacre them at dawn. The brothers have unwittingly signed their community's death warrant. But before the night even properly begins, a much greater threat emerges. An all-consuming supernatural hive mind, a la Body Snatchers, led by Remick, an Irish vampire. Remick is also the result of oppression, just a different kind. He suffered under British colonization centuries ago and experienced religious persecution. From the black community's perspective, Remick is a monster who, over the course of the night, picks them off one by one, tightening his grip around the juke joint. From his perspective, though, he's basically a messianic figure who offers salvation to them, an end to the discrimination and injustice. His legacy was, in a sense, taken from him, and in vengeful grief, he yearns for a kind of new world order, a reality where equality is absolute, but at the cost of one's individuality. In Remic's world, the prejudices, fear, and oppression caused by the Jim Crow South and the Klan don't exist, but as stated, the price is high. The conflict between the two sides is also expressed through music, which is the heart and soul of Sinners. On the Black community side, the music signifies their individuality, with blues in the forefront. That genre is personified by Sammy, the brother's younger cousin and an obvious prodigy who has the power to connect past and present, the living and the dead. By contrast, Remic, given his roots, makes his flock perform and dance to Irish folk music, erasing their individuality regardless of heritage. Every member of the hive becomes an extension of him. Over the course of the film, Remic begins to target Sammy specifically because of his supernatural gift, as he believes it will help him reconnect with his ancestors, his lost legacy. Toward the film's final act, the mythic vampire, who has already amassed a horde of converts, warns the community of the Klan's imminent attack and sets an ultimatum. Stay human and be killed by morning, or become one of us and lose your soul to a collective. Sooner or later, everything culminates in the film's intense finale, where the heroes are forced to face a horde of vampires. In a blood-soaked epic battle, the juke joint is destroyed and almost everyone is killed. With the conflict spilling outside, Remic and the vampires relentlessly pursue Sammy, hoping to claim his supernatural gift. Sammy manages to wound Remic with his guitar, but not enough to stop him. Just when Remic is about to sink his fangs into Sammy,
we will make beautiful music together.
Smoke appears and drives a stake straight through his heart. The two survivors hold out just long enough for the sun to rise. It incinerates the vampires, including Remic, ending his reign of terror. Smoke, realizing he has little left to lose, follows Remic's tip and decides to take care of some unfinished business. In an act of personal redemption, he eradicates the local Klan branch and gets mortally wounded in the process, and in death reunites with his family. In the epilogue, taking place roughly 30 years later, Sammy, the night's sole survivor, is seen as a successful blues musician. He became a vessel that is carrying the community's history forward, expressing his people's legacy through an art form that transcends time and space. The theme of legacy is not only woven into every single film, but gets progressively deeper and more nuanced. Oscar Grant was a random person who had his legacy defined by others. Creed inherited his father's legacy and later redefined it on his own terms. T'Challa and Shuri not only battled their personal demons, but had to protect and reshape the legacy of an entire kingdom. And in Sinners, the theme was framed through oppression, with the conclusion that legacy is worth preserving even when everything else is lost. At this point, legacy seems to kind of be Coogler's thing, and we're curious to see whether his next film will continue the trend. Either way, despite still being pretty early in his career, he has already proven himself as a thematic storyteller numerous times, and has long since become one of the writer-directors to watch out for.
You're one of those pretty god-tier writer-director motherfuckers.
And it's a lovely mug, bro.